our Debrief web series. My name is Austin Barraclough. I am your host. To my left here is John Albright. He's my co-host for this episode.
What's up, people? How you doing?
He's a champion and a master. And this is a series where we interview some students and leaders that we sent to the Dominican Republic on a missions trip just a few weeks ago. Today we have with us Lydia and Grace. Lydia and Grace, thank you so much for being with us. How are you doing?
Pretty good.
Great.
So glad to hear it. Hey, thanks for being here. Grace, I'll start with you. What is your relation to the gathering, and how long have you been a part of it?
I am a small group leader with the gathering. I started, I think, right after Easter in 2018.
Okay.
And sat in on Taylor's group for the rest of that year, and then started my own group the next season, so last fall. And
Started your own, you broke off. You're like,
I
listen,
really did. I was
you went
I was ready.
Solo. Yeah, love that. Great. And Lydia, how long have you been a part of the gathering, and what grade are you in?
I'm a sophomore, so it's my second year in the gathering.
Nice, awesome. Do you like it so far?
Yeah.
Great. You kind of have to say that. I put you on the spot here.
No,
This is like
I
gathering.
think it's a great place to come together with fellow students. I like it a lot.
Good. Wow, I appreciate that. All right. Well, we're gonna get into it. So you both went on this trip. Obviously, Grace as a leader and Lydia as a student. And by the way, this is our first duo interview. So thank you so much for being together and talking. So it's gonna be great.
Oh, wow, you missed the cue. That's fine.
Oh.
It's totally fine. Burned.
Wow.
But what
That's
else
rough.
is new? I think I was burned 100 times during that week.
Oh my
Fine.
gosh, we're jumping right in. We're coming in
It's
hot. Okay, so one thing that I love, and this is even obvious right now, is the team dynamic, and especially between you two, especially having you both on right now. Like, can you talk a little bit about your relationship that you formed, first of all, in the lead up, and then also on the trip, what that relationship looked like and built into?
Go ahead.
Before the trip, like, our small groups were right next to each other, and my small group was really loud, and her small group would get really mad at her small group.
Okay.
So I felt kind of bad. But then, like, even, like, as we were leaving for the trip, we weren't close. But then we were in the same, like, cabin, and I think that's when we really bonded.
Got it.
It's true. Yeah, during lead up, I didn't really connect with any of the students leading up, unless, I already had a connection with two of them, Megan and Lily. Not the Lily that was on here, the other Lily.
Right.
Because they were in my small group all year. So I didn't really know any of the other students. And then when we got to base, Kim divided all of us girls up because obviously we have way more girls than guys. And she gave me only 3 students, and it was Lily G, Megan S, and Lydia Wolf.
Amazing.
And I felt like the mother hen all of a sudden because they were all like really young. They weren't seniors or juniors. They're all sophomores or freshmen.
Megan's
Okay, summer before doesn't count though.
okay.
And yeah, it just kind of went from there. I realized how much of a goofball she is.
Great.
And in a lot of ways, you're exactly who I was when I was a teenager. Like,
I'm so sorry.
How quick was it for the chaos to ensue in the cabin when you're in another country on a missions trip?
I
with
mean, it
3
really
other
just
girls?
went up from day one.
Just ramped up every day.
Like, literally the first night, it was just a whole lot of fun. We were all really tired, so everyone was kind of delirious, and we were, like, figuring out the showers and everything. And then by the end of the week, I was on the floor eating half of a spider. We didn't know what was going on.
You didn't prep me on that. I'm checking my notes, and eating half of a spider isn't here, so tell me about that.
Okay, my favorite thing to do when I woke up every morning was look over, because I was on the top bunk, and I would look over and I would check who was in their bunk and who wasn't. So Megan was underneath, like the bunk underneath me, she was always there, and Lily was always in hers, and then I would look at Lydia's bunk and it was empty, and I would have to scan the floor to try and find her. And one day, do you want to tell the story about the spider? Come on.
Well, I was on the floor. I don't know why or when I got on the floor, but I just had my pillow and I was like sleeping on the floor.
Okay.
And there was
like just woke up and was on the floor.
Yeah, and there was
Great.
half of a spider's body next to me on my pillow. So we assumed that I ate it.
Wow. Oh, so this was an assumption. Okay.
It was you threw your pillow. Do you remember? She said that she thought she had heaved her pillow across the entire cabin, and it had only gone like 3 feet, maybe.
Got it.
And then that's when we found half of a dead wolf spider.
Wow.
And she just assumed that she ate it,
I'm
because
scarred for life.
why else would a
gonna
wolf spider only have 4 legs?
Yeah. How do you cut spiders in half unless ingested?
Mm-hmm.
Highlight
Wow.
of the trip
And then
for
we
me.
got home that night from the beach, and we saw like a family of ants pick up the carcass and leave with it.
Oh.
Yeah.
That feels like a cartoon.
Yeah.
Incredible.
It was epic.
Things that happen on mission trips, eating spiders. I feel like we ask a question a lot at the end, but we just answered it, and that question is, what would you say to someone thinking about going on a mission trip? And it's go so that you can possibly eat a wolf spider.
I mean, when else are you going to do it?
When else are you going to have that chance? Probably never.
Highlight of the trip for me.
Wow. That's fantastic. So, okay, so we've heard a lot in this series about the sites and back at base and just kind of the way the trip went. I want to talk a little bit about toward the end of the trip. Mm-hmm. So you've both said that the end of the trip were some of the more impactful days, whether good or bad. Not bad necessarily, like bad, but just difficult and trying. So let's talk a little bit about the end of the trip as you're finishing up your time at your ministry sites. You've already been with everyone for, almost a week now, your whole team and all the leaders there. Tell me about Thursday and what happened on Thursday in the evening.
So Thursday was debrief night for our entire team, and it happened up on the balcony, like on the base. There was a almost fully enclosed balcony on the second floor, and that's where we would always do worship. And so that's where it was chosen that we would do our team debrief. And we were going through a few different things, and a lot of it was questions about how are we going to re-enter, what are we going to do when we get home, like really good things that you should be thinking about when you come home from a missions trip.
Yep.
And all throughout the week I kind of felt like time was moving really slow. Like it felt like we weren't even there for that long, which in the grand scheme of things we weren't. But I just remember always feeling like, okay, what is my purpose? I felt very much fish out of water because I've been on missions trips before.
Okay.
And all of them had like a very clear purpose that we were supposed to play as the people from the outside who were coming in short term. And like in East Asia, where I went the last time, the very clear mission was you're here to be a prayer warrior. You have no way to communicate with these people. The language being spoken is their second language, and they're still learning it. So you really have no choice but to be a prayer warrior. And this trip, it was kind of like I don't really know what I'm supposed to be doing because the gospel has already been shared. Almost everybody that I've talked to through translator is saved already. I mean, I could pray for the poverty here. I could pray for everything else, but honestly, what am I doing here? And it really came to a head, I think, on Thursday because I knew that I was supposed to be there, and I knew because spiritual warfare is real. And I started playing the comparison game with myself in a way that I haven't since I was like a young teenager, where I was always comparing myself to the other leaders. Like, I'm not as deep and intellectual as this person, or I'm not as fierce of a leader as this person, that type of thing. And it was weird because you ended up, is it okay if I say it? She had a panic attack that night. And I remember Megan was trying to get my attention from across the huge circle that we were in. And I looked up just in time to see her kind of like run out of the room, and I didn't really know what was going on. So I went after her, but other leaders had already beat me to it. And I was just like, oh, good Lord, sorry. Okay. I was just like, what is the purpose that I have here if I can't even help the student that I'm technically responsible for who's sleeping in my cabin with me? And just really felt like I didn't have a purpose. I didn't have a reason to be there. Like nobody needed me for anything. It was just kind of like you're existing until you get off the plane when you get home, and then you'll never see these people again, at least until the next week. So it was a really it was hard because I didn't really know what I was supposed to do to help you or anybody else. Mm-hmm. And still questioning, like, what in the world am I doing here? Why did God bring me here? And all that. And then, yeah, that night, you and the girls really, without you guys really knowing it, you really encouraged me that night. And it always seems like when I question myself or when I doubt my ability to lead or to be a good example to the students, they build me up and they remind me, like, no, God brought you here for a reason, and you don't have to question that.
What was your experience like of that night and also of that moment? What brought you to share those encouraging words with Grace that you did?
So, like, before the trip, I didn't feel the most ready necessarily, like, spiritually to go on that trip, and I was kind of wondering, like, why is God putting me on this trip? What is the point of going on this trip? And throughout the entire week, that was kind of the mindset I had. At my ministry site, I didn't really feel like I was having an impact, and I got sick 2 of the days, so I couldn't even, like, work with them, and I was like, why does God want me on this trip if I'm not even contributing? And, like, I feel like this was a waste of the church to bring me.
So you were sharing a lot of Grace's feelings.
Yeah.
Okay.
For sure. And that night, I had the anxiety attack, and, like, it was very much out of nowhere, and I don't know what triggered it or, like, why it happened, but I think God used that to provide, like, time for me to connect with Taylor specifically, which I think is such a God thing because, like, we've both kind of, like, talked to each other before, but we've never had, like, a connection before, and he allowed us to kind of, like, get closer, and she shared a lot with me that really helped me in that time. And then going into that night in the cabin, like, I was just thinking about the trip and, like, what God wanted me to do on that trip, and I feel like it was more him serving me in a way that he was reminding me that we have leaders at the gathering or people in the gathering who, like, are there for me and want to care for me, like Grace. I think I'm so grateful for our relationship that we have now on this trip, because in the gathering I never really had a leader that I connected with, or, like, in the middle school ministry here, and I feel like this trip kind of helped me realize that it's okay to, like, branch out, like Megan, Houlihan, Grace, and Taylor. I think I really connected with, and I think that that's, like, my biggest takeaway from the trip, so I think it was just definitely a God thing that I got to get to know her better.
Yeah. Those are pretty significant things to happen on Thursday night with still a whole day of ministry left, particularly the last day of ministry. So how are you experiencing these things of sort of intense, whether it was a panic attack or this sort of this time of questioning yourself and your purpose with still one day left? How did you turn the corner on that and say, like, okay, but, like, we've still got things to do? Like, how did you conceptualize what you were still yet to do on that last day?
I think for us in our ministry site, Friday was more of a chill day, and that was actually the day that I ended up doing the most praying, because we were going around to the different neighborhoods, and, like, we were right next door to one of the clinics, like the ministry site that I was at, Women's Social Work. So the teams grouped together and went to a ton of different people in the neighborhood that the site leaders knew and knew needed help. And I don't even remember how long it took. It felt like it didn't really take that long, but we got to see more of the neighborhood and more of the people, and you see more of the poverty. So it's just, I don't know if it's natural for everybody, but for me, I feel like it's natural to just be moved to pray for those people and pray for the situations they find themselves in. So it was more of a chill day than the previous days, at least for me. Got it.
Lydia, how was your experience on going into a whole nother day after having had a panic attack the night before?
Yeah, it was kind of similar to Grace's day because it was more of a chill day. It was like, I was at the education site, so it was the kids' like end of the year party that they were having. So we didn't really do much at the site that day. It was just kind of like sitting around watching the kids with their families.
Sure.
So I think it was like a good time for me to kind of process what had happened the night before. And I think I really got to like understand more deeply what had happened, and I got to think about it a lot, which I think was nice that day.
Could you share some of those insights, or what were some of those things that you had learned that with the opportunity to sort of think about it again, what happened the night before?
I think I just really started to kind of understand like why sometimes God is gonna like let anxiety attacks happen, because I've been dealing with that for a while.
Okay.
And I think that this was one of the times that it definitely like a lot of good came out of it, and like I'm not thankful that I had the anxiety attack, but I'm just very thankful for the outcome of it. And I think that it was just like a really beautiful thing what came out of it and what spurred on from like that event. And I got to like process these new relationships that I was having, and like it kind of got me excited for like future times that I was going to spend with the people, and I just kind of got to like think about that. And
yeah, that's great. So you finish up Friday, you've kind of finished your formal ministry, and you have a sort of off day, like a Sabbath, to explore, and that was Saturday, and it was described to me as a day of existential crisis at a beach day. So Lydia, tell me about your existential crisis at the beach day when you were exploring and Sabbathing.
Okay. There were a lot of things factoring into why that day was just not a great day. I was really tired. Mm-hmm. I had to wear this ugly bright green shirt. It was the only shirt I had left, and that caused a lot of problems for me throughout the day. And then
aesthetic
also,
is everything. I'm on board.
Well, the thing is, I don't like swimming at the beach.
Okay.
I just won't do it. And I didn't have like shorts or a skirt to wear, so I'm wearing jeans and my bright green t-shirt, and I'm like, great, I'm about to burn up. So they're all like, oh, let's go in the water, let's swim. And everyone's like, Lydia, don't you want to come in? And I was like, no, don't talk to me. I was kind of, mad. Anyways, they're all swimming, and I'm just like burning on the beach, and it's sandy. And on the beaches, they have like men who are trying to sell you stuff like in these boxes, and they try to kind of like compliment you. So they'll be like, oh, beautiful lady, you want to buy my jewelry? It's like, no, I don't. But anyway,
taken out of context, this whole situation seems a little odd.
Don't use this as any promo material.
We should preface that, because outside of this specific episode, that sounds really odd.
Please, if you're watching this clip right now, go back and watch the whole thing from the beginning. It's okay. Everyone was safe. It's fine.
Totally safe.
Yeah, so this guy was kind of like attacking me. He was like, oh, you look Dominican. Why are you not with the Dominicans? You're with all these white people. And I'm in a mood at this point. Yeah. And it's like really, really hot. Yeah. I'm hungry. I want to eat. It's just a bad situation.
Okay, we were getting up to leave, and I had fallen asleep in the lounge chair and got scorched on half of my body. And then I, wake up just in time to hear the announcement, okay, we're walking to dinner. I was like, okay, great. And I look, and Lydia was, on the verge of an emotional breakdown. And I was like, are you okay? And she was just like, I was like, okay, let's go. And instead of getting up, she lays down in the sand, face first. There was no towel down. So
amazing.
She, sand everywhere.
Yeah.
Everywhere.
That's
everywhere.
The worst part of the beach is
I know.
sand everywhere.
And I inflicted it upon myself.
You did.
I was dealing with self-hatred and also beach hatred at the same time. It was
rough combination.
Mm-hmm.
So you had a rough dinner, and then
and then the water ran out at the base, and no one could take showers.
Was that night? Oh.
Real talk mission trip, people. Listen.
Yeah.
It's not always peachy.
Yeah.
Probably
the drive home wasn't that bad though. You were sitting next to me. You can't say it was that bad.
It was so good.
Yikes.
So things didn't turn around.
I set myself up for it.
Someone literally said to me, they're like, you need to have a positive mindset. That's why you're so upset right now. And I was like,
So things didn't turn around until the next day.
And okay, the person who was trying to cheer you up, if that's what you want to call it, their heart was in the right place.
But my mental space was not in the right place. So I was like, no.
Yeah. Not ready to receive rational.
No, not at all.
No.
Yeah. So your time serving was less traumatic than your time potentially having fun, and maybe that's a blessing from the Lord.
Did we get you an ice cream cone that night though?
We did. I needed an ice cream at that point.
Wonderful.
Yes.
The small blessings.
Mm-hmm.
Even as you were fighting questions of purpose and self and all of that, that the time that you were the time that you were serving and you're at your ministry sites, and sort of the end of the week when you're doing these debrief things, those felt at the very least like God was present.
Very much.
Can you talk about in what way you feel like that was true?
Do you want to go first?
Sure. Personally, like, I didn't really enjoy the trip much. The first few days, like, it just wasn't a good trip for me. And honestly, when Taylor asked me to come on here, I was like, why do you want me to do this? Like, I didn't have a great time on the trip. I don't feel like I'm the right person to come on a podcast and talk about it. But I do think that, like, I definitely have a different perspective, and, like, a lot of different things happened to me on the trip that I didn't think would happen. But especially on the debrief night, I definitely, like, it was the first time on the trip that I really felt God's presence. And, like, I didn't feel great, but I definitely knew that, like, God was with me, and it was a very eye-opening and just probably life-changing moment for me personally, because it was like he was there in the middle of it all, and it was very encouraging, and also just, like, it came at the right time, because, like, I was, like, so frustrated that I had even gone on the trip, and, like, I wished I hadn't gone, and, like, everything felt like it was going downhill. But I definitely think that, like, God was like, no, like, I want you here, and I'm proud of you for how far you've come so far. And, like,
do you feel like feeling the presence of God on that debrief night was worth some of the less great aspects of the trip?
Yeah, for sure, because it was, like, one of the most powerful moments that I feel like I've experienced with him, and, like, I can still feel it, and I think that it was just very encouraging.
Okay, that's great. A final question for each of you. Grace, do you feel like, looking back at all of those things that you were struggling with, that you talked to us about, that came to a head on the debrief night, do you feel like there was, I know you talked about a little bit of a resolution in the cabin later with your girls, but looking back even now, do you feel like there's an even larger resolution, a sort of wider angle picture of what you went through and what you now have taken from that experience?
Yes. I feel like my answer is going to be like the equivalent of verbal processing, but I think I do, just because it's hard to really see if you've had an impact. Like, being a small group leader over the last, I'd say, like, the second half of being a small group leader, it just kind of became like going through the motions. Like, I felt like my girls were engaging and everything, but it didn't have that same revolutionizing feeling that it had at the beginning. Like, oh my gosh, I have a purpose for being here, and sure. I know that this is where I'm supposed to be, and all that, like, all the feelings of peace and kind of security left. And I really started questioning, like, okay, if I'm not supposed to be here, then where am I supposed to be? But I think Megan Houlihan talked about it in her episode, where the theme of the week was faith. And I, like, leading up to it, there was just something that I was really praying about and, like, wanted. And I really felt like I was saying, like, okay, this is going to happen, and you need to just trust me. And all week long, I just was, like, on the verge of tears, because I was thinking, well, if I have to leave this place and I have to go somewhere else, what am I going to do? And just getting really, really sad, and come home now, and that thing that I felt like God was telling me about didn't pan out. But the whole overarching lesson of, you need to go on faith, because you don't know. You don't know what's going to happen. You don't know what's waiting for you on the other side of this trip. And realizing that faith on any level, when it comes to action, requires a little bit of risk. And that's, like, the biggest lesson that I've come home with. Because going into the trip, faith is just, it's easy to say, oh, I have faith, because you believe in something that's higher than yourself, right? But faith as an action, not an object, is something kind of different, because you have to act on it in order for it to grow, and to tell God, like, okay, I'm trusting you. And coming home, that's just kind of been the reinforced lesson. Like, have faith. You don't know where I'm going to take you. You don't know what I'm going to do with you. And you just have to trust me.
Yeah. So your experience and the sort of resolution of that time on Thursday was a sort of small version or representation of what's going on in your life kind of all together, and wow, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Lydia, what do you think, especially as someone who had a harder time of it on the trip and it wasn't easy and as enjoyable, what do you feel like you carry with you from the trip moving forward?
I'm still kind of processing what happened on the trip, and it was definitely a very hard thing for me to do. But I think what I carry most is confidence to walk out in faith with God, and that once you do fully put your trust in him, then he is gonna come beside you, and he's gonna be there, and he's gonna show himself to you. Because that's always been a hard thing for me, faith in God. It's always been about well, the Bible says this, the Bible says that, I should do this, I should do that. But I think the trip really helped me understand that God is so much more than actions and words. It's faith in who he is, and I think that that's such an important thing for me in my faith, just to have that belief in him and to know that he is with me. So I think that's what I carry with me most.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for being on. It's been a real pleasure. Lydia, Grace, thank you so much, and we're excited to have you around in the gathering and to embark into the fall with you. John, you want to head to camera one? Thank you so much for watching. This has been the DR Debrief. We have 2 more episodes that are going to be coming out the next 2 Sundays. So keep checking back in with us, and we will see you in the gathering on Sunday mornings. See you later.